At least when I drink my coffee, I'm not like that owl whose eyes were wide open and feathers going off in all directions. And he said, I've had so much coffee today, I can't even close my eyelids. I'm glad that you're here today. I've had some exposure to Hinduism in the trips that I've made into India. I have no doubt that there are probably some others who have had a lot more exposure to it, but I'm going to do what I can to try to present some things about Hinduism that I did not know about 10, 15 years ago. One of the things that I've noticed about the lesson on Islam and my study on Hinduism, and no doubt other religions as well, is that there's an amazing amount of confusion in the religious world. And we look at denominationalism and the various doctrines that are taught that are contradictory to one another. And when people look at Christianity and they envision Christianity as what denominationalism presents, it's no wonder they think that Christianity is a foolish religion. But the division and confusion in some of the Far East religions like Islam and Buddhism and Hinduism is not an imagined confusion. It is a real confusion. And as you listen to Brother Evan's lesson on Islam, we sometimes think about religions like that and we wonder how people could be so easily deceived. I want to suggest to you that every false doctrine that is presented to men as an alternative to God's truth is designed to remove responsibility on the part of the man toward the God of heaven. And that's true not only in Far East religions, world religions, but that is just as true when it comes to false religions and Christianity. And after I get through with this lesson, if you are really confused about Hinduism, you are not by yourself. And even after examining it carefully, it's still very confusing. I'm sort of challenging with something here. I'm trying to operate two different slide presentations at the same time for the simple reason that we could not get these to harmonize. If I were asked to define the Hindu creed, I should simply say, search after truth through nonviolent means. Hinduism is a relentless pursuit of the truth. Those are the words of one of the most well-revered and well-known historians in India, Mahatma Gandhi. And after studying Hinduism, I took a closer look at what he had said about the desire for the search for truth. And I've just inserted a few words here that I think better explain what Hinduism is. It is a relentless and vain pursuit after something that is not there. It's an imagined thing. And even though we appreciate the desire to obtain truth in any aspect of life, this is anything but a search for truth. A number of years ago when I started working with Brother Nehemiah Gudam in India, I would ask him questions about Hinduism to try to get a grasp on exactly what Hinduism is. And the more he talked about it, the more confusing it became. So we're going to try to break this down a little bit and give you just some basic thoughts on Hinduism. Look a little bit at its origin and history, some about its religion, its fundamental beliefs, and then tell you about some things that are actually happening in India that shows the struggle that we are winning in parts of the world, particularly in India as the church grows so rapidly. If you look at this map, you get an indication as to how Hinduism developed culturally. The Indo-Europeans migrated into the area that we now know as India somewhere between the year 2000 and 1500 BC. Hinduism has been called the oldest religion in the world, and if I compare it with a number of other world religions, that may be true. But I'm speaking to an audience that is fully aware that the oldest religion in the world was the patriarch religion. It was given by God to man, in which he spoke to the fathers through the prophets and through visions, Hebrews chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. That migration down into India occurred at a very interesting time in the history of the Bible as well. when you look at the biblical record of Abraham's call, best dates around 2100 BC, 2000 BC, and it struck me when I looked at Abraham's call recorded in Genesis chapter 12, that this was in advance of less than a century of the development of cultural Hinduism. God was fully aware of what was going to happen in that part of the world, and so he called Abraham out of that part of the world and landed him in the land of Canaan, where of course he would be blessed and eventually his seed would inherit that land. So when you think in the concept of biblical terms, you get some idea as to how all of that unfolded. But when I deal with Hinduism and the cultural changes that occurred in that massive move into what we now call India, it was more of a cultural move than it really was a religion. It became a religion that is closely tied to the social movement. Just highlighting a few phrases, this comes from a lecture that Brother Stephen Waller gave in the Power Lectures on Dangerous Ism. His Hinduism, I'm trying to keep coordinated here, and I'm sort of like the fellow that tried to chew his gum and pat his head at the same time. Hinduism is a religion, a culture, a way of life that is so diverse and has undergone so many changes through the centuries that it is difficult to define or describe. There are more than 1 billion Hindus. Now that's about a third of the population of those who are Muslims, but when you add those figures together and you've got 3 billion Muslims and you've got 1 billion Hindus, that's 4 billion, almost half, more than half of the world's population have been captured by these two false religions. And thus we can see the great need for preaching the gospel. Hinduism does not have any central earthly headquarters. A former president of India has stated that Hinduism is more of a culture than a creed. Hindu is the Persian word for Indian, and yet when these Indo-Europeans moved into the area of India, they set up a religion based on idolatry that they carried with them and merging with the idolatry of that particular area in which they were migrating, eventually down in toward India. And when you start talking about the Hindu religion in general, it is a system of mass confusion. This is a copy of the chapter on Hinduism out of a book on world religions by Josh McDowell and Don Stewart. And I want to read just a couple of quotes from their introductory page on this religion. They write that Hinduism is not only one of the oldest of all religious systems, it is also one of the most complex. And during its history, Hinduism has spawned a variety of sects holding diverse beliefs, and therefore it is difficult to get an accurate picture of Hinduism without considering a vast array of history and commentary. And then he quotes an expert on Hinduism, does not state what his religious background is, but here is what this author, John B. Noss, states about Hinduism. It is not one religion, but rather a family of religions. Hinduism is fluid and changing. By the way, when you look at Far East religions and world religions, that's one of the character traits of any of those. They're very fluid. They're changing constantly. There's no solid platform or foundation upon which to build their religion. And that's one of the major contrasts between Hinduism or Islam and Christianity. Christianity describes a faith that has been revealed, a faith that is absolutely solid, built upon the foundation, of course, of Jesus Christ. This author continues by saying Hinduism is the whole complex of beliefs and institutions that have appeared from the time when their ancient and most sacred scriptures, the Vedas, were composed until now. Hindus have an extraordinarily wide selection of beliefs and practices to choose from. They can use, to use the terms in our Western world, they can be pantheist, polytheist, monotheist, agnostics, and even atheist, and still be a Hindu because of the vast number of gods that they worship. He then quotes from a gentleman by the name of Joseph Gayer, and here's what this gentleman writes about Hinduism and its complexity. Just as the attributes of the Hindu triad multiplied until there were millions of them, and the caste divided and subdivided from the original 4 to a very large number, so also has this extremely old religion given rise to many sects. There are sects who worship Vishnu. There are sects who worship Shiva. We'll talk about these gods more in a little bit, but he lists a number of those gods that are worshipped by the Hindus, and it's sort of like a smorgasbord on religion. You can just sort of pick and choose what you like in religion. Now, what I want to address first of all is what is commonly known as the caste system. And we sometimes think of the caste system as a religious system, and it is a religious system, but it's more of a social system that was set up when the Indo-Europeans were migrating to this part of the world in order to control the people that were there. And this amalgamation of religion and social order was arranged in what we sometimes refer to as the Indian caste system. And basically there are 5 levels, and the belief on this is that a person is born into a particular caste. I've had the opportunity to visit in India and experience interaction with almost every one of these castes, people from each one of these castes. Have had the opportunity to study with Brahmins. They are priests, they are those in the academic realm. They're very educated, they're very privileged, and they are considered the top notch in society. And you're born into that caste, that upper caste. And then you have what is referred to as the Kshatriyas, and these are the rulers, administrators, and even the warriors, those who demonstrate courage, and they are second level on this caste system. And then you have what we call the Vaishyas. These are the artisans, tradesmen, farmers, the common laborers, we might say. And then you have what you call the Sudras, who are the common labor. These are people who are hired from time to time to do menial tasks. But on the lowest part of the caste system are the Dalits, which are the untouchables. That's literally what that means. And these are people who have the kind of jobs that nobody else will do. They just won't engage in them. Sweeping of streets, cleaning of latrines, they are the common people. Those in the low caste, when they enter into the presence of anyone higher than they are, they will keep their eyes down. There'll be no eye contact. And I have preached to Hindus in villages who were low caste, and they would not even look up. They would not even lift their eyes up to me or to Nehemiah, thinking they were higher caste. But one of the amazing things about Christianity is as you go and teach these people the gospel of Christ, there's a common bond that comes with being a part of Christianity. We experience that when we travel, and you come into a city, you visit a congregation with which you've never been acquainted, you've never met the people, but as soon as you pass through the doors, there's a sense of commonality. And I've seen low caste Hindus and upper caste Hindus who have obeyed the gospel put their arms around each other and sit in the pews and sing with each other. And when the time comes for their census to be filled out, their 10-year census, most of the Christians, if not every one of them, will then put on their census form no caste. They don't want to choose caste anymore. And there are a lot of ramifications to that. They give up a lot of privileges, whether it's high caste or low caste. But they recognize that in Christ, that we're one body, that we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And that is one of the most encouraging aspects of watching the conversion of someone from Hinduism into Christianity. Now then, I want to spend some time and talk about the sacred writings of the Hindus. And these are really quite multiple because almost every imaginable means of writing material becomes a sacred record. But basically, the Vedas are their wisdom or their knowledge. That's a general term that is used to describe all of the sacred writings. And sometimes you'll see a reference to a particular sacred writing that is called the Vedas and then have terminology that follows that. They just recognize that as the grouping of all the writings together. The Upanishads are a collection of speculative treatises, and these deal in areas that are secret, things that are unknown. What happens to the soul when it dies? Where does it go? What is the underworld like? And things of that nature. And so that is one of the major writings as well. The Bhagavad Gita is the most sacred of the Hindu writings. And when you come to the Bhagavad Gita, it is the essence of the Vedas. And one thing that struck me when I was looking at the description of this particular group of writings is it claims to have the answer to every problem that man faces in life. Now, having been to India, and I'm going to share with you some of the fruits of Hinduism in a little bit, when it says it has the answer to every problem of man that he's going to face in life, I wonder why the country, socially speaking, economically speaking, morally speaking, is in such disarray. I have my doubts that it's because they don't attempt to apply that. I have the problem is even in the application of it, there's no consistency. One of the books that I have in my library that I found extremely interesting was it's co-authored by two men called Conybeare and Howson, and it's the life and epistles of St. Paul the Apostle. And they would trace the life of Paul, and when he would come to a certain city or a certain part in his journeys, they would take time to describe the culture. And when Paul entered into Athens, they took a moment to describe the Athenian religion, the various Roman gods. And one of the things that they made, one observation they made about these various places where Paul went and encountered the different Roman gods was this. He said they were very religious. You think of the Greek mythology and the Roman gods, very religious. And yet there was nothing in that religion that would lift them up above their moral depravity. A moral depravity the likes of what you read in Romans chapter 1. So every decision then ultimately is the final decision is what a man thinks and how he interprets that writing. And I'm reminded of the reference in Judges when it says that after Joshua had died and all the elders who had outlived Joshua had died, there arose a generation that did not know God, and every man became a law unto himself. That's a good summation of what you have in Hinduism. Another group of the writings are the Remyana, and it's one of the two major epic tales in India. It simply tells the stories of a warrior by the name of Rama. Then you have the Mahabharata, the second epic telling the story of deeds of the Aryan clans. You'll see the term Aryan clans or the Aryan invaders. That was the name that was given to those from Indo-Europe that came down into the land and invaded the land. And then you have the Puranas. That's not piranhas, the devouring fish. That is Puranas, legends of gods, goddesses, demons, and ancestors. They teach moral behavior and they expound on moral truths. And one of the things that I have found in my encounter with various Indians when I'd make the trip over there to the country is they have a certain sense of morality that is taught to them, and a lot of their family ties will either enforce that morality or, like any culture, they will fail to enforce it. But I have found the Indian people, even Hindus to a large extent, who have a deep appreciation for morals, and that becomes a converting point when you start dealing with Hindus. Let me talk about the Hindu gods. You're going to find this extremely interesting. 330 million Hindu gods. I'm not suggesting that any of the Hindus know all those gods or have counted all those gods. The strange thing about the development of gods in India is this, and Nehemiah and I were traveling on one occasion, Nehemiah Goodham and I, and they were building a national highway from one city to the next, what we would consider our interstate systems. And the highway would be moving along, and all of a sudden it would veer to the right and immediately veer back to the left. And right in that little loop would be a temple of some kind. And a Hindu, all he has to do is go out and declare a plot of land as a sacred land, build his temple, and that land is forever dedicated and holy and sacred. And not even an interstate highway is going to interfere with that Hindu's worship to his God. And that's all over India. It appears all over India. So when we talk about the Hindu gods and the 330 million Hindu gods, you're dealing with quite a bit, but many of these are just very personal. One Hindu writer by the name of Vishwanathan states, "It won't be wrong to state that God did not make man in his own image, as the Old Testament says, but instead man made God in his own image." That is the sum and substance of virtually every single false religion. Man makes God in his image. And have we not in the Western world done the same thing? We've remade God in our image, and hence we are as guilty of idolatry as some of those foreign nations are. So whatever he sees, he can build a shrine to it, and it becomes a place of holiness. Let me show you some of these gods, and I've seen idols erected to these gods scattered throughout the areas that I've traveled in India. The highest god is probably Brahman. He's the indefinable, he's the timeless reality, he's immovable, inconceivable, unborn, and an impersonal God. Will you just look at those adjectives for a moment? They're self-contradictory, are they not? But this particular God is depicted as a bearded man, sometime in groups of 2 or 3, sometimes appearing with what they call their triune God, which we'll mention here in just a moment. And then another God that they have is the Om or the Om. This is the vibratory aspect of the Hindu gods. And no doubt if you've ever heard a Hindu singing or chanting, he'll Om, and he'll end it Om. That's the name of his God. He's praying to that God, this vibratory aspect of God who sings and utters particular sounds. And then another God that you have is what they call the Trinity, or the Trimurti. So Brahma is included in that, the God of creation, Vishnu, the God of preservation, and Shiva, the God of annihilation. They believe that each one of these are true gods, playing various aspects or different aspects in their religion. Then you have the mother goddess, which consists of a number of gods as well. Saraswati, the god of knowledge, Lakshmi, the god of wealth, Parvati, the god of power. And it's almost as if it's an endless array of these false gods. And there's no way I could even begin to list the 330 million. I'm giving you the representation of the major gods that they worship. Ganesha, various spellings on that, but it's traditionally worshipped before any major enterprise, and it's the patron of intellectuals, bankers, scribes, and authors. When we had the opportunity in India to go to some of the larger cities like Hyderabad, or travel over to Visakhapatnam, or even down to Guntur, and there were activities going on in the city during the Hindu festival week, this was the primary god that you would see being worshipped or carried on a wagon through the streets trying to collect funds. He's sometimes depicted as having sweets in his hand, handing the sweets out to children. And when this particular idol is built, there are treats scattered all around this idol, and children will come and bow before that idol in order to get the treats. Shiva is one of the most important gods in the Hindu pantheon, a member of the Holy Trinity, who along with Brahma and Vishnu, basically Shiva is the protector of the Vedas, the one who watches over the sacred writings and the sacred texts. And then you have Krishna, who is one of the most widely revered and most popular of all Indian divinities. They actually believe in particular type of incarnation, and he's considered to be the eighth incarnation of the Hindu god Vishnu. I'll talk a little bit more about their reincarnation here in a little bit when we look at some of their various beliefs. Rama is one of the most widely worshipped Hindu deities. It's the embodiment of chivalry and virtue. If you talk about a warrior, a brave warrior that goes out, this is the god that they would worship before they enter into a battle or engage in some kind of an adventure. His adventures include the slaying of the demon king Ravana, and the stories are almost endless. Let me show you two or three others. Hanuman is one of the central characters of the Hindu epic Ramayana. He's the son of the wind god, and he's referred to as the monkey god because of his face, his facial features. And if you'll look at this in proportion to the surroundings of this particular god, this thing is enormous. They build these idols 10, 20, 30 feet high and bow down to these various gods. Vishnu is the second god in the Hindu triumvirate, preserver and protector of the universe. His role is to return to the earth in troubled times, restore the balance of good and evil, also known as Narayana and Hari. You've heard Hare Krishna and various aspects like that and chants that they use. And then you have Lakshmi, the consort of the god Vishnu, very popular goddess of Hindu mythology, known as the goddess of wealth and purity. You have Durga, who is a major deity in Hinduism. She's worshipped as a principal aspect of the mother goddess Deva, and is one of the most popular and widely known gods. By the way, these various gods, depending on what area in India you're at, some are worshipped more than others, and it's tied in so very closely with the culture of that particular area. But try to wrap your mind around this vast multitude of gods. They're gods of nature: Shira, Soma, Vayu, Agni, Varuna, Indra or Devendra. These are things like the sun, the moon, nature. Then you have gods that are basically gods of wealth, gods of the birds, the god of the mountains, the god of snakes, rivers. It's an endless array of these false gods unto whom they bow. They're gods of fields, gates, villages, the elephant-faced Ganesha. It's really quite incredible that anyone could come to believe in that kind of a system, and still even more. This never ends. Avatars, I wanted to point this out. Sometimes you'll read about the avatars of Vishnu. An avatar is the incarnation of a deity in human or animal form to counteract some particular evil in the world. And so we could spend a lot more time on these, but I want to hasten, and it's not time for me to quit. Surely not. Let me just quickly say a few things about the fruits of Hinduism. You're seeing pictures here that show the squalor, the poverty, the filth of the society in which they live. And I can tell you, when I stepped into India my first time, I was not prepared for what I saw. I was not prepared for it. This is a picture of a parade during the Hindu festival week, in which they would go through the streets and ask for money, and then they would take that money and their gods, and they would load those gods upon a wagon, and they would take it to the river, and they would dump that god in the river along with all the money and jewelry that had been placed on the wagon around the feet of that false god. And they're very dedicated in this. These young boys would dress up in this Hindu worship garments, and they would literally step out across on an international highway. They would step out across and try to stop the traffic coming at them at 130, 140 kilometers an hour, and they will stand there until they're run over. That's how dedicated they are. And so while Paul waited for them in Athens, his spirit was stirred in him when he saw the city wholly given to idolatry. And that is a great expression of how we feel when sometimes when I'm in India. I want to do one more thing. I don't have the time to talk about these fundamental beliefs, But there's one that I do want to just mention to you, and that's the belief of reincarnation. They believe in an endless cycle of reincarnation, and they envision that you're going to move from one level to the next, and it depends on the karma. You've heard that, the karma that you have. And I came across a little item in my research that basically said that this endless cycle of reincarnation is it's got another 247,000 years for you to get it right. For some reason, all of a sudden, I'm just not worried about climate change, are you? But that's a system that they have latched on to, and I encourage you to do some further study for the simple reason that Hinduism is growing rapidly in our country, particularly up in the north, the area of the north. And Brother Nehemiah Goodham shared with me some reasons as to why that growth has become so dramatic. In the 1970s, Hinduism began to fade in India because of lack of financing. And it was about that time that we had Indians coming to America, getting their education in medicine, law, and whatever, staying in America and sending funds back to India to finance Hinduism. And it's resurging again. And unfortunately, because of that, we're starting to see greater opposition on the part of the government officials in India to try to block Christianity coming into the country. Let me tell you a little bit about the work in India very quickly, and then I'll draw this to a close. I've been involved in the work in India for about 20 years now, off and on. I haven't been for a while, but you're seeing pictures here of the results of our preaching and our teaching. We preach in villages. Now this fellow, we couldn't convince him, but we decided we'd wrestle him to the ground anyway. They're trying to hold him up as we get ready to baptize him with the waves. But we've been working in India and preaching and teaching. I work with the Kakinada School of Preaching that was established in the late 1960s. I still work with them very closely in raising funds. It is the largest preacher training school in India. They have typically from 60 to 80 students full-time who live on campus. I know every one of these members of the staff. Brother Nehemiah Goodham is the gentleman in the center, and I'm always in close contact with him as we continue to raise funds. We have 2 orphan homes in India, and the reason why I'm showing you this as we think about the work of Hinduism is that I asked Nehemiah to send me an email and let me know what is the best approach, and he said, here's the difference. And they let their light shine, the Christian light shine, and they show people what it's like to love people, truly love people, and what it's like to live a good moral life and to worship a God that cares for you and providentially is involved in your life. And that makes an impression upon Hindus. And I asked Brother Nehemiah, I said, can they grasp the concept of a single God, a God who created the universe? And he said, yes, they can. And we use very simple illustrations to try to convey to them the true God based on evidences, the inspiration of the Bible based on evidences, and to show them what it means to live a Christian life, and particularly, and this is one aspect that they really latch on to, is to show them there is a hope of something far beyond this endless cycle of reincarnation that really is a pursuit of something that's not there. But the Christian has the pursuit of something that is there. I hope you'll take some time to study Hinduism further. It is a convoluted, crazy, confusing religion, to say the least. It is growing. It needs our attention, and it needs our addressing that so that we can bring more souls to Christ. Thank you very much.